The gospel today comes from the Gospel of Matthew, the 2nd chapter. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go, search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, when it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. Well, good morning, everyone. Now, contrary to popular belief, the Hallmark Channel and radio stations, the 12 days of Christmas are not the 12 days leading to Christmas Eve, but in fact begin Christmas Day and lead us to, well, last night and into today, to a lesser-known holiday in the Christian tradition called Epiphany. Happy Epiphany, everyone! We may not be as familiar with it, but it is commonly celebrated in the Catholic and Orthodox traditions, and many churches and cultures around the world include Epiphany as part of their holiday season, where they celebrate the three magic kings, the wise men from the east, the gifts that were given to the baby Jesus. In Spain on Epiphany morning, typically January 6th, today, it is common to celebrate with family and friends, and a special cake or pastry known as roscon. It is a ring-shaped roll filled with cream or chocolate and decorated with a paper crown. Inside the cake are typically a figure of a king, and if you find that piece, you get to wear the crown for the day. And there's also a dried bean. If you find that, you get to pay for the cake. In Mexico, they have a similar tradition, this Dia de los Reyes, the Day of the Kings. Only instead of a kingly figure, there's the baby Jesus inside. And whoever finds that piece of cake gets to be the godparent for Jesus for that year. In Portugal, they sing special songs. In Italy, they hang stockings on their mantle for Befana, a mysterious older woman who gets depicted as a witch oftentimes, comes and fills them with treats and goodies. In Austria, they make special signs above their doors written in chalk symbolizing what year it is and the initials for the three wise men for protection for their homes for the coming year. And while these are all interesting and great traditions, where I really want to celebrate Epiphany is in Ireland, where they sometimes also refer to this day as Noleg na Mabin, or Women's Christmas. Here, the women get the day off from household duties to spend with the other women in their lives, and the men get to do all of the housework and all of the cooking. This sounds wonderful, right? Well, Epiphany also reminds us of one Christmas tradition that has become really important in the United States today: giving gifts. When we think about it, the gifts that we give and receive tend to share a lot about ourselves and our relationships with each other. So as I thought about the gifts that we gave this year, I was reminded of a blanket that we gave to a loved one who's transitioning to a care facility. so that he may be wrapped in love in this new place. We have a person in our lives who really loves coffee, and finding that special mug for them was a joy. And this year, one of the gifts that my 2-year-old received was his first set of underwear, showing that we think that he is ready for this big boy transition, although we may be more ready than he is. We remember today the gifts that the travelers from the east brought to the Holy Family in Bethlehem some time after Jesus was born. Now, we don't know much about these travelers or how many of them there were specifically, but we do know that they were not Jewish and did not know the specific traditions and customs. We can assume that they were men or people of power, prestige, and dignity based upon the knowledge that they had and what they did know. Because upon hearing the news and following the star that the Messiah, the King of the Jewish people, had been born, they knew they must go and greet him. Upon arriving in Bethlehem where the baby laid, they were overwhelmed with joy, so much so that they knelt down and gave praise and thanks for whom they were meeting, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These would have been strange gifts to give to a small child, but Jesus wasn't just any child. And knowing that these wise men were upstanding, courageous, faithful, and aware people, and from another tradition at that, helps us understand how these unique gifts were not necessarily strange, but share the really important story of who Jesus was, is, and will become. Expecting to greet a king, gold is a very appropriate gift. It signifies wealth, status, and emphasizes Jesus' identity as the long-awaited-for King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the one who has been hoped for and promised by God. Then the frankincense, the fragrant and expensive gum from an African tree, while more unfamiliar to us than gold, was commonly used as incense and burned in places of worship. This was a gift that people gave to God regularly. And it showed that even though these travelers were not part of the same tradition, they knew that God was present in this tiny one they were visiting and worthy to be praised. And wait, there's myrrh. Myrrh, the last of the 3 gifts offered to the Christ child, was another expensive therapeutic gum or resin to be burned that was often used as medicine, to treat infections, to cleanse impurities, and was also commonly used in the embalming process when someone died. This gift, while it may seem incredibly impractical for a family with a newborn or toddler, could also be the first foreshadowing of what will come at the end of Jesus' life, of how he will suffer and die at the very hands that he came to save. These unique gifts, when thought of collectively, share quite a bit about Jesus, and the fact that he receives them from these mysterious travelers who show up from all walks of life and from the edges of the world as they would have known them, share quite a bit about who Jesus came to this earth for. I often think that we spend a lot of time emphasizing these gifts that were brought to Jesus, as if it were easy to bring God the things that we value the most and simply hand them over, as this cosmic, almost comedic lesson that if these mysterious people could do it so seemingly effortlessly, then so can we. But in reality, it's not easy to let go of our prized possessions or items of wealth and status. It's not always easy to put what is right ahead of what is comfortable. In fact, it's downright difficult some days. And all too often, we fail to emphasize why these gifts were given in the first place. We tend to skim over the fact that when the travelers arrived at this humble estate, that they recognized a deeper truth, that they were in the presence of God, of God made visible, of God in human form. And when they realized that was when they were overwhelmed with joy, and where their only response was to worship, to praise, to give everything of meaning that they owned. It was this overwhelming joy that led them to feel confident to give them the gifts that they gave. Now, 2,000 years later, we don't have the luxury of being in the physical presence of the Christ child, but we do have these teachings, traditions, and stories. We can learn about how he lived, died, and rose again, and we can find out that when he ascended into heaven, that this gift of overwhelming joy that he gives to us is placed upon each person in the gift of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit who has come to dwell among us, giving us the freedom to not be weighed down by fear, insecurity, or despair. And that this isn't something that we earn or receive only once we hand over our valuables, but instead resides within us no matter what. Seeking those moments where we use it and bring it to life, where we offer our gifts freely and recognize that we are someone of value and can keep God's presence on this earth visible. There's a popular contemporary Christmas carol that also shares this message. It is thankfully fictitious, and maybe you've heard it this season, The Little Drummer Boy. If you get past the pa-rumpa-pump-pumps, it's the story of a poor boy who hears about the newborn to come and see, and when he gets there, instead of being consumed by the fact that he doesn't have the finest riches to give or isn't a person of power and wealth, he quickly realizes that he has another gift to give that is meaningful. He can play his drums. And he does so with Mary's consent to the best of his ability, bringing joy to the baby. Pa-rumpa-pump-pump. We too have unique gifts to share. These are the things that give us meaning, the abilities that we spend a lifetime working on, the values that drive our actions. And maybe this is the message that we need to embrace as we complete this Christmas season, as we celebrate Epiphany and walk into the new year, that God, the Creator, the Christ, and the Holy Spirit dwell among us and within us as this unique gift, yearning to be put to use in our daily lives. And that when we feel this overwhelming joy, we have the ability to use these gifts and talents that we've first been given, to keep joy and peace and generosity alive all year round. And that it won't always be easy, but it will be worth it. So this Epiphany season, I want to leave you with the words of author and theologian Howard Thurman. When the song of the angel is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and the princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among others, to make music in the heart. Amen.